She saw my car parked outside for a few hours and immediately called a tow truck, said it looked suspicious. Well, she didn't know. That suspicious car was an unmarked police vehicle. And when the tow guy showed up, lights flashed, badges came out, and Karen nearly passed out on her porch. Let's just say that tow truck left empty, but the HOA's reputation? That took a serious hit. There's a funny thing about quiet neighborhoods, the kind with tidy sidewalks, HOA-mandated mailboxes, and decorative mulch piles. They all promise peace, but sometimes that peace is just a thin layer of quiet hiding a thick layer of control. When I moved into my new home, I wasn't looking for trouble. I'd spent the last 11 years wearing a badge, the kind of job where your pulse rarely rests. In the city, I'd worked everything from narcotics to community crimes, and most recently, a rotation handling administrative investigations and interagency coordination. It wasn't the stuff of TV dramas, but it was real work. Hard work, sometimes draining, always important. So when I finally closed on a place just outside the city, a nice, modest two-story in a development surrounding a man-made pond, I had one goal: breathe. I didn't want attention, didn't want special treatment. I just wanted a stretch of street where I didn't have to chase anyone. A house with no bullet holes. A front porch where I could drink coffee instead of stakeout. The neighborhood was nearly everything the brochure promised. Quiet, clean, predictable, until it wasn't. The first couple of weeks were smooth. I moved in during early spring. Trees were just beginning to bloom. The grass was still finding its color. I unpacked in silence, waved to a few passing neighbors, and started setting down roots. I drove a plain, four-door vehicle issued to me by the department. No markings, no visible lights, no sirens. It looked like any other government sedan, dull gray, well-maintained, a little too clean for a civilian car, but otherwise unremarkable. I parked it right in front of my own house, a couple feet off the sidewalk. No one said anything. At first. The first note appeared on my windshield one Tuesday morning. White paper, laser printed, not handwritten, printed, with the HOA logo stamped at the top and the heading in bold. Notice of non-compliant vehicle. I blinked. The language was oddly formal. Something about vehicle lacks visible resident identification, may be considered abandoned or improperly stored, and is subject to review pending HOA compliance standards. I scanned it twice, then checked the signature line. Karen Matheson, HOA president. I hadn't met her yet, but I'd heard the name. One of my neighbors had mentioned her in a joking tone. Something about her measuring grass height with a ruler and photographing people's flower beds after dusk. Still, I wasn't going to escalate. I walked the paper inside, calmly typed a response, and dropped it into the HOA mailbox near the clubhouse. Dear Ms. Matheson, the vehicle in question is a government-issued vehicle used for official business. It is legally registered, insured, and parked in accordance with city and HOA parking rules. If there are any further concerns, I'd be happy to discuss in person. Respectfully, my name. Polite, direct, nobody flashing, noton. I figured that was the end of it. It wasn't. A week later, she showed up in person. I had just finished mowing the lawn when I saw her walking down the sidewalk, clipboard in hand, sunglasses on, tight smile already stretched across her face. Good afternoon, she chirped with that sing-song voice that makes you feel like you're already in trouble. Hey there, I said, wiping sweat from my forehead. Karen, right? She blinked, as if surprised I knew her name. Yes, she said, shifting her clipboard to her chest. I wanted to speak to you about the vehicle. The gray one. Yep, it's mine, I said evenly. Belongs to the department. She paused. I see. The thing is, residents are required to have visible permits or decals when parked overnight in the common area. It's not a common area, I replied. That's public street frontage directly outside my house. According to the plat map, that portion is city-owned. There's no HOA restriction on curbside parking unless it blocks emergency access. She pursed her lips. Well, it just looks unusual. That was her real issue. It didn't look like it belonged. Didn't look like a family car. Didn't fit her image of neighborhood normal. I understand, I said, keeping my voice calm. But it's perfectly legal and within all community guidelines. She tilted her head. Well, Just know we've had issues in the past with suspicious vehicles, and it's my job to make sure the neighborhood stays safe. I raised an eyebrow. That word, suspicious, carries weight in my world. And using it for a government vehicle parked outside its owner's home? That was either ignorance or arrogance. Either way, I didn't flinch. I appreciate your concern, I said. But I assure you, there's nothing suspicious about it. She gave a tight nod, scribbled something onto her clipboard, and walked away without another word. After that, I started noticing her more often, sitting on her porch, glancing at the car every morning, lingering by the mailbox when I got home late. Once, I caught her taking a picture of the vehicle from across the street. She pretended to be on her phone, but the posture was all wrong, tilted slightly forward, thumb hovering over the shutter. I didn't confront her. I wasn't interested in making a scene. Besides, every move she made was just annoying. Not illegal, not threatening. Until the morning, I heard the low rumble of a diesel engine out front and looked out the window to see a tow truck backing up to my car. That was the moment the peaceful new neighborhood image officially broke. I hadn't missed a payment, hadn't ignored a fine. There was no boot on the tire, no warning from the city. This wasn't civil enforcement. This was Karen enforcement, and she had no idea what she'd just started. There's a specific kind of arrogance that only blooms in small, well-manicured neighborhoods, the kind with brick mailboxes, standardized porch lights, and self-appointed rule enforcers who think a clipboard grants them jurisdiction over reality. Karen, unfortunately, had cultivated hers to full bloom. After our brief conversation about the unmarked vehicle, calm, civil, and in my opinion, resolved, I expected the matter to drop. But for people like Karen, facts aren't the end of a conversation. They're just speed bumps on the way to domination. She didn't get her way, and worse, I didn't flinch. That was unacceptable to someone who'd grown used to everyone nodding, apologizing, or moving their trash cans within 15 seconds of her knocking. So, she escalated. Over the next few days, more notes began appearing on the windshield of my unmarked vehicle. First, they were still printed and official-looking, stamped with the HOA letterhead she probably had custom designed. But soon, they grew increasingly dramatic. Unregistered vehicle still parked overnight. Final warning. This vehicle continues to be parked without visible permit or decal. Security has been notified. Vehicle suspected to be abandoned or unlawfully stored. Immediate towing may be enforced. I didn't respond to any of them. I'd already explained it once. I wasn't about to repeat myself just because she wanted new performance. I wasn't hiding anything. My car was legally parked, fully insured, and absolutely within my rights to keep it curbside. The HOA had no jurisdiction over the vehicle, and certainly no authority to tow it, unless I was in violation of a specific rule in the bylaws, which I wasn't. But Karen wasn't interested in rules. She was interested in control. Then came the absurd part. One morning, just before 7 a.m., I stepped out to grab the mail I'd forgotten the night before. The neighborhood was still half asleep, birds chirping, sprinklers hissing. I walked down the driveway in my t-shirt and gym shorts, sipping coffee, thinking about nothing in particular when I saw it. A tow truck, engine running, hazard lights flashing, slowly reversing down the street toward my unmarked police vehicle. And who was standing there beside it, arms folded across a windbreaker that practically screamed, HOA approved? Karen. At first, I thought I was seeing things. There was no way, no possible way, that this woman had ordered a private tow truck without checking anything first. But there it was. Back wheels lined up, hook dropping. The tow operator already halfway out of his cab, gloves on, clipboard in hand. I put my coffee down on a mailbox and walked toward the scene. Morning, I said calmly. Everything okay? The tow operator, a guy in his 30s with sunburned arms and a Bluetooth earpiece, looked up at me, surprised. You the owner? Yep. He glanced at Karen, then back at me. HOA said this thing was abandoned. No registración. Told us to come get it. Karen, not even trying to hide her satisfaction, interjected. It's been parked in the same spot for over a week without a permit. We gave you several notices. It's a violation. I took a breath. Not because I was angry, not yet, but because I needed to stay precise. When you've dealt with escalating situations on the job, You learn how to pace your voice like a fuse, steady, slow, but guaranteed to land. That vehicle, I said, is an unmarked department-issued law enforcement vehicle. It is registered, active, and legally parked. Karen scoffed. I don't see any law enforcement tags. There's no government plate. Exactly. It's unmarked. That's kind of the point. She waved a hand like she didn't believe me. Anyone can say that. I pulled out my wallet and flipped open my badge and police ID. The tow driver blinked. Karen stopped smiling. For about 3 seconds, everything went dead quiet. Then the tow driver straightened up and took 2 steps back. Whoa, you're a cop. Yes, I said plainly. And that car is part of an ongoing investigative program. Towing it could constitute interference with departmental operations, not to mention civil liability if it gets damaged. Karen's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. I wasn't told. You didn't? Why wouldn't you put something on it then? Hot dog. A decal? A notice? Because, I said, now leveling my gaze, that's not how unmarked law enforcement vehicles work. And you don't get to decide what looks official. The law does. The tow driver stepped back toward his truck. Yeah, I'm going to stop right here. Sully, Munn, I don't want any trouble. You're fine, I told him. Appreciate you stopping when I said something. Just doing your job. He nodded, shot Karen a confused look, and walked back to his cab. Karen, meanwhile, just stood there, her arms slowly lowering, face flushed like someone who just realized they accidentally called 911 on a plainclothes officer during a training drill. I was just following up on a community complaint, she muttered. No, I said calmly. You were acting on your own authority, and you didn't check facts. You didn't knock. You didn't ask. Karen bristled. I left multiple notices. You left accusations. I corrected. And this wasn't a mistake. It was a power play. She tried to regain footing. You still should have informed the HOA about the vehicle. I don't have to. Not legally. Not according to the CC and RS. And certainly not when at a government vehicle parked in front of my own property. She shifted her weight uncomfortably. The posture of someone who knows they're technically cornered, but too stubborn to admit it. I turned to the tow driver, who now had the truck in park and was already documenting the call on his tablet. Do me a favor, I said. Include in your notes that you were told it was an abandoned vehicle, and that I identified myself as law enforcement on scene. Already got it down, he said. Time stamped and everything. I turned back to Karen. You're going to get a call about this, I said. Not from me, from my department. And if this vehicle had been hooked or moved, you'd be answering for a lot more than a policy violation. She didn't respond. Just turned on her heel and walked briskly up the sidewalk, past 2 neighbors who had come out to water their plants and now stood frozen mid-spray, watching the entire thing like a live HOA episode of Law & Order. The tow truck pulled away a minute later. I picked up my coffee again. Still warm. Still good. The fallout hadn't even started yet. But Karen? She just towed her credibility straight off a cliff. There's a fine line between a misunderstanding and a violation. Most people step over that line without realizing it. Karen? She built a paved road over it, installed a toll booth, and tried to charge me rent. After the tow driver rolled away, thankfully before he touched the vehicle, I stood there on the sidewalk, coffee back in hand, and took a slow breath. Not because I was rattled, but because my professional brain had kicked in. Karen hadn't just made a mistake. She had initiated the removal of a government-issued police vehicle on false authority with 0 verification. And whether she wanted to admit it or not, that's interference. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to post about it online. I was going to document everything, like I'd done 1,000 times before. Clean, professional, by the book. Because if there's one thing I learned in law enforcement, it's that the quietest response often makes the loudest statement. As Karen Power walked up the sidewalk, I turned and headed inside. I didn't follow her, didn't shout after her. I didn't need to. Her embarrassment had already done most of the talking. Instead, I walked in my home office, sat down, and made 2 phone calls. The first was to Officer Daniels, the department's legal liaison for interagency complaints and civil conflicts. Daniels and I had worked together during a multi-agency task force 2 years earlier. He was sharp, thorough, and absolutely no nonsense. Hey, Daniels, I said when he picked up, got something for you. I explained the situation in detail, Karen, the notes, the warnings, the unauthorized tow attempt, the fact that the vehicle was issued by the department, and that the incident had unfolded with full public visibility. I kept it factual, precise, and fully professional. Daniels didn't miss a beat. She actually tried to tow it, he said, dead serious. She called a private service. Tow driver got on site, started backing up before I intervened. He logged everything. I've got badge verification on body cam. If needed, send me the tow company name and timestamps. I'll open a file and send a memo to legal. They're going to want this documented. He paused. You wanted to make contact with her directly? Not yet, I said. Let's just put it on record for now. Daniels chuckled. You sure? I've got a nice boilerplate letter that scares the arrogance out of HOA presidents in under 300 words. Tempting. Let's wait 24 hours. Copy that. My second call was to internal logistics, just to ensure the vehicle log and daily use record were up to date. They confirmed everything on file, including where the car was assigned, mileage reports, and overnight storage approvals. All locked in. I added one note to the file. Unauthorized tow attempt. HOA instigated. Prevented in time. No damage. That was all I needed. The next part? Paper trail. I took photos of the remaining violation notices she had left on the car, scanned, and dated each one. I annotated timestamps based on when I'd found them and compiled it into a PDF. Then I emailed it all to Daniels with a subject line. HOA Karen versus Unmarked Unit 47. Attempted tow, March 14th. Daniels replied 10 minutes later. Already flagged by legal. They're prepping a courtesy advisory. Let me know if she speaks to you again or calls the department directly. Now, in any normal situation, you might think Karen would lay low after that. A mistake that public usually earns some humility. But not Karen. Oh no. About 2 hours later, I got a knock on my door. I opened it to find her standing there with a printed form. Not even a personal conversation, but a formal notice of informal HOA warning regarding unauthorized use of street parking. It was signed by her, dated, and attached to a page from the community handbook that she had highlighted badly with a yellow marker. I didn't even need to read it to know it didn't apply. This again, I said calmly. I'm simply documenting my concern, she replied stiffly. You may have some sort of position, but that doesn't exempt you from resident standards. I tilted my head. Karen, I'm not violating any standard. That car is city property. You don't have authority over it. The residents have expectations, she snapped. No, I said. You have expectations. The residents just want peace. She flinched at that. I could see it. It landed. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't close the door in her face. I simply stepped forward, met her eyes, and said evenly, You're going to receive a letter from the city within the week. I recommend you take it seriously. She hesitated. Are you threatening me? No, I said. I'm warning you. Kindly. Because next time you overstep like that, it won't be a letter. It'll be civil liability. Or worse. She didn't speak again. She turned, walked down the steps, and disappeared behind her front door. By the weekend, the letter arrived. The department's legal team had sent an official notice of municipal non-interference, a rare but real document typically reserved for civilians or HOAs who tamper with government vehicles, disrupt surveillance operations, or threaten officers' mobility in non-crisis zones. It wasn't scathing, but it was crystal clear. This correspondence serves as formal notice that any unauthorized action taken against property issued by City Police Department, including vehicles operated under assignment by sworn personnel, will be considered unlawful interference with active law enforcement property. No resident or HOA has the authority to inspect, restrict, relocate, or report for removal any such vehicle. Further attempts to do so may result in civil or criminal investigation. It wasn't just Karen who saw it. The letter was CC'd to the HOA board, the neighborhood's attorney, and the city liaison for public safety coordination. And once a few other residents got wind of it, especially after spotting the certified mail envelope in Karen's hand, the entire story began to unravel. Neighbors started talking, not just about the tow attempt, but about all the little things Karen had done over the years. The aggressive notices, the mystery rulebook citations, The time she tried to get a kid's lemonade stand shut down for lacking sanitation clearance. One of the board members, Angela, quietly reached out and asked if I'd be open to attending the next HOA meeting to clarify expectations moving forward. I said yes, because at this point, it wasn't just about a car. It was about reminding a few people, politely, that the law isn't something you get to rewrite just because it makes your neighborhood prettier. At that meeting, I didn't speak long, just 10 minutes. I introduced myself, gave a calm explanation of what happened, reaffirmed my respect for the neighborhood, and gently, without shaming, reminded them that tampering with government property is not only illegal, but dangerous. People nodded. Some looked embarrassed. Others clapped. Karen didn't speak once. Her clipboard was noticeably absent. Karen didn't disappear after the incident. That would have required humility, and humility was never her strong suit. She tried to do what people like her always do when they've been caught overreaching: pivot, deflect, and rebrand the whole thing as a misunderstanding. The next day, she was out front again, sweeping her perfectly clean porch, clipboard conspicuously absent, but her usual watchful presence restored. But the tone had changed. She wasn't met with the usual neighborly waves or polite nods. Not anymore. This time, folks glanced, hesitated, then looked away. Not in hostility, more like disbelief. As if they were still processing the fact that Karen, their self-appointed protector of peace, had tried to tow a law enforcement vehicle out of her neighborhood like it was a rusted-out RV from a stranger's yard sale. The first ripple came at the HOA board meeting that week. Typically, these gatherings were a sleepy affair. A few board residents, coffee in foam cups, and Karen leading the room with scripted authority. But this time, the folding chairs filled quickly. Notebooks came out. So did eyebrows. People wanted answers. Angela, one of the quieter board members, called the meeting to order. Karen sat stiffly to her left, avoiding eye contact with most of the room. "We've received a formal letter," Angela began, "from the city police department. It regards an incident involving an unauthorized towing attempt on a government vehicle." A murmur swept through the room. Karen winced slightly. "While no action was taken," Angela continued, "the letter was clear in its message. HOA members and board officers are not authorized to interfere with government property under any circumstance. Doing so can result in legal consequences." Karen raised her hand, a little too quickly, as if to reclaim her footing. "I'd like to clarify that I acted out of concern for the community. The vehicle had no markings. I followed standard parking notice procedures outlined in the HOA manual." Angela didn't smile, didn't frown, just looked at her evenly. "You also ordered a private tow truck without board approval, without verifying ownership, and without following up on the written response you were given. That's not standard." The silence after that was heavy. Not angry, just heavy with realization. Like someone finally pulled back the curtain and revealed a system people had blindly accepted for too long. By the end of the meeting, a motion was introduced to limit unilateral action by the HOA president regarding vehicle-related complaints. The vote? Unanimous. Karen didn't even bother to raise her hand. From that moment on, any future notices, even those about trash bins or lawn height, had to be reviewed by 2 additional board members before being distributed. Her authority had been trimmed like an overgrown hedge. And for someone like Karen, that stung more than any official reprimand. But the fallout wasn't limited to policy changes. It was personal. Neighbors started to remember things, little moments they'd brushed off at the time. A family recalled how Karen told their visiting relatives to move their minivan because it violated driveway width guidelines. Another neighbor remembered her snapping photos of Halloween decorations and warning about aesthetic consistency. It had all seemed annoying back then, part of the price of living in a tidy, HOA-managed neighborhood. But now it felt like pattern behavior, pattern control, misuse of authority, a habit of policing what didn't need policing. The neighborhood began to speak, gently at first, then more openly. In morning jogs, at the park, during Saturday grocery runs. "Did you hear what she tried to do? She really called a tow truck on a cop's car? Can you believe she doubled down on it? After seeing his badge? It wasn't gossip. It was recognition. The kind of recognition that slowly undoes a reputation, thread by thread. 2 weeks later, I came home to find a handwritten note in my mailbox. It wasn't anonymous. It was from Greg, a neighbor down the block I'd only spoken to once. Just wanted to say thank you, not just for your service, but for keeping your cool through all of this. Most of us didn't know what was going on behind the scenes, but we saw how you handled it. Respect doesn't come from a clipboard. It comes from character. You've got mine. Simple, clean, honest. And it echoed what a lot of people had started to feel. Eventually, Karen's emails to the community, the ones she used to send bi-weekly with subject lines like, "Let's beautify together," and "Springtime standards matter," stopped arriving. Angela took over communication duties. The tone shifted immediately. Now the emails talked about block parties, neighborhood watch updates, and actual community service, not mailbox paint colors or shrub height violations. In one particularly unexpected twist, the board sent out a poll asking if residents would be interested in a Community Appreciation Day. The response was overwhelming. The event was planned for the park on the edge of the subdivision with food trucks, music, and, for the first time in neighborhood history, a formal acknowledgement of veterans, first responders, and public servants who lived on the block. I didn't ask to be honored, but they asked me to speak. I kept it short, just told the truth. That service doesn't stop when the badge comes off or when the deployment ends. That sometimes it looks like being calm in the face of ignorance, or protecting your home without raising your voice. And that real authority isn't about writing the most rules. It's about knowing when not to use them. Karen was there, sitting near the back under a sun hat. She clapped when everyone else did, but the fire in her eyes was gone. Not broken, just humbled. A little smaller, a little quieter. And, to her credit, she never tried to reclaim her old status after that. She stopped issuing parking notices. She stopped policing driveways. She stopped pretending her clipboard gave her more power than it did. She even, eventually, spoke to me in passing. "No apologies." Just a faint nod and a polite "morning." That was enough. By summer, things in the neighborhood felt different. Not just calmer, healthier. Kids played in the cul-de-sac without being scolded about sidewalk chalk. Cars came and went without worried glances. One resident, a retired paramedic, started hosting grill nights once a month. Another opened up his garage to teach bike repairs to the teens. The energy shifted, and the people who once whispered about Karen behind closed doors, they spoke openly now about respect, fairness, and what kind of leadership truly builds community. That IT didn't happen with a big announcement. There was no dramatic resignation, no impassioned speech. Just a quiet line tucked into the minutes of the next HOA board meeting. Karen Matheson has chosen to step down from her role as HOA president, effective immediately. No one clapped. No one gasped. The room just nodded quietly and collectively understanding that this chapter had closed itself. Like a rulebook too full of red ink, it had simply run out of room. The vote for new leadership came and went with surprising ease. Angela stepped in as interim president, and within a week, she had already done what Karen never managed to, actually listen. Meanwhile, I went back to living. No more notes on my windshield. No more photos taken from across the street. No more long sighs when I pulled into my own driveway. Just normal life. Exactly what I'd moved here for in the first place. What surprised me, though, was what came next. Neighbors, people I'd barely spoken to before, started approaching me. One brought over a casserole. Another baked cookies. A Vietnam vet who lived at the end of the street stopped by with a salute and a story about the time someone tried to fine him for flying a POW flag in another neighborhood. "You handled it right," he said. "Didn't bark, didn't swing, just stood your ground." I heard that phrase a lot. Stood your ground. Not in the aggressive way it's often meant, but in the calm, composed, you didn't let her rattle you way. For a long time, I tried to keep work and home separate. I didn't want to be the cop on the block. I wanted to be just another neighbor. But somehow, after everything that happened, people respected that more, not less. The HOA, for its part, issued a new policy update. Short and sweet. Effective immediately, no HOA officer or representative may initiate action against law enforcement, military, or government-registered vehicles without prior verification and legal authority. Common sense to most. But apparently, it needed to be written down in bold. Karen didn't contest it. She didn't even attend the meeting where it was passed. As for me, I made one final change. Right there in the corner of the car's windshield, nestled behind the registration tag, I added a small metal badge-shaped decal. It was subtle, matte black, and only visible if you look close. Above it, in tiny print, were the words, "Police property, HOA not authorized." It became something of an inside joke on the block. One neighbor said she was thinking of making a t-shirt version. Another asked if I could sell stickers at the next community cookout. I laughed, but part of me liked that sign, not just for what it said, but for what it meant. That sometimes the best way to respond to control is with calm truth and a touch of irony. Peace had finally returned to the neighborhood. Not just silence, real peace. The kind where trust grows again. Where people wave for real instead of out of obligation. Where authority serves the community, not the other way around. Karen faded into the background, no longer feared or followed. And me? I got what I came here for. Not just a home, but a place where I could breathe and maybe even laugh now and then at the ridiculous fact that, yes, someone once tried to tow a police car out of cop's own driveway. Welcome to the suburbs. If your HOA thinks they can tow anything with wheels, remind them, some vehicles don't just come with plates, they come with a badge. And the next thing getting hauled off might be their authority. Because here's the truth. Power isn't about clipboards, titles, or laminated newsletters. It's about knowing where the lines are and what happens when you cross them. Karen thought she was enforcing the rules. But what she really did was try to flex control over something that didn't belong to her. A vehicle that, by law and by duty, stood outside her reach. And in doing so, she didn't just expose her ignorance. She towed her own credibility straight out of the neighborhood. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't slam any doors. I let her hoist herself on her own paperwork, and the law handled the rest. So the next time someone thinks your driveway is their domain, or your car is their concern, remember this. You don't always have to fight loud. Sometimes the badge under the dashboard and the law behind your silence do the talking. And when that happens, they don't just back off, they back down.